Welcome once again to Sid Caudle. And Sid, of course, leader of the Christian People's Alliance. And we're going to talk about some unusual subjects today. We'll start off with a bit of footy. And we usually end with a bit of footy. But there's a difficult headline come out this week. And that is that when the United of the Manchester variety played Spurs of the London variety. I said to you, I remember saying it, I'm not happy because I thought Manchester United had been sussed. If they were playing a foreign team, they'd have probably won the cup. But the Premiership sussed how to play Man U, and sure enough, they were defeated. And quite rightly, they had a shocker. But they've been having shockers, Manchester United, all season. Having said that, we're not going to dwell on that because it makes my heart very sad. That is the following. Before the fans arrived in Bilbao, what happened it was that everybody visited each other's bar, and they said, all the restaurants and bars, look, if they speak English, double the price of your beer. If they speak Spanish, charge the ordinary prices. Now, that's not very nice, is it, from Spain?
No, it's not. But I suppose from a business perspective, they're thinking, these people aren't our regular customers. They're going to be here for a few days and then go home. So we don't lose anything by overcharging them. Whereas our regular customers, if we overcharge them, they won't come back. So we're going to lose business. So if you just look at it from a hard-headed business perspective, it's, I guess, understandable. But frankly, I think it was wrong that since it was an all-English final, that the FA didn't move it and have it in the UK. I mean, I know they promised it to Spain, but they could have easily said to Spain, okay, but it's not going to work for you to have this one. So you can have the next one. We'll have this one. We'll relocate this one to Wembley because it'll be so much easier for the fans for both Spurs and Manchester United if we have it at Wembley, and it'll avoid enormous number of flights and goodness knows what. People travelling to Spain. I mean, they were talking. I mean, there must have been 100,000 or more people travelling to Spain for that final, which frankly is crazy, and it'll be enormous cost for everybody involved.
Sid, we won't say boo to a goose in Britain. We're frightened of upsetting people. There's no way we're going to do a Trump and sensibly do what you've just said, which leads us on to Mr. Starmer and Ms. Reeves and co, especially Mr. Starmer, who's decided to kill himself. He's pressed the nuclear button on himself. So the headline said this week. And that's the way he's tried to win the electorate over. Well, I don't think it will do. He's made two glaring errors, in most people's opinion, apart from the taxation. I won't raise tax on national insurance. What? There are lots of things that he said he wouldn't do before the election. And lo and behold, he has done. There are billions, for instance, going to the Chagos Islands. Billions, Sid. Nobody can understand it. Well, they can actually behind the scenes. Because if you start digging, you realise what that's about. And it's about Starmer himself and the way he sees things through his special glasses that he wears. Because he wants to promote international law, never mind the consequences, even for his own country. That's why we've still got ECHR as an example. Of course, the other reason is that he clearly wants to go back into Europe. And he's spent billions on that. So those two double whammies could well cost him, even in 4 years' time, the election. Now, when you've got a person that is driven by the law and not justice, this is what happens. We're in a sad pickle at the moment, Sid.
Yes, but it's not only about the law, it's also about the way Keir Starmer is actually pursuing the law and interpreting the law. Because we have to remember, of course, he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service before he came into Parliament. And some of the things that the Crown Prosecution Service did when he was head of it was just appalling. I mean, I remember actually highlighting, for instance, that the Crown Prosecution Service issued an edict that we're not going to pursue people that for minor sexual offences, like, for instance, two homosexuals having sex in a public lavatory. We're not going to prosecute people for that. However, we are going to prosecute people for hate crimes. So basically what that meant was that if somebody saw two homosexuals having it off in a public lavatory, if they phoned the police and said, I've just seen these queers doing something obscene in the public lavatory, the police would prosecute the person that made the phone call for their hate crime and would do nothing about the people that were actually committing the offence. Now, that was Keir Starmer. And that shows you his attitude as head of the Crown Prosecution Service. But you're absolutely right, Keir Starmer is a globalist, but he's not he's proven in the last year as Prime Minister, because it's almost a year now, to be utterly dishonest right across the board. I mean, I said for a long time that Keir Starmer can talk a good job and he talks the right thing, but what he does is something completely different. I mean, for instance, he actually talked about balancing the books. We're going to balance the books when we're in power. We're not going to do like what the Tories have done, increasing debt. They've increased debt enormously. We're going to balance the books. That's what he said. What he's done is debt's gone up. Well, the deficit has gone up significantly since they've been in power. The deficit being the difference between what you raise and what you spend. Now, you don't expect debt to go down unless the deficit is actually less than zero. That's when debt goes down. But what he basically said that he would have the deficit at zero, but far from having the deficit at zero, it's actually gone up significantly. It's now 122 billion. And if you realise that before COVID struck, it was 38 billion. So obviously because of COVID, it went up significantly, but the Conservatives were bringing it back down again. Since Labour have come in, it's gone back up again. That's the reality of it. And then, of course, there's all the other promises, like he vowed he will not increase national insurance, but national insurance has gone up. I mean, but also, after the last budget, Rachel Reeves said there will be no further tax rises. They're now saying, oh, it's almost certain there will be further tax rises. Every promise made has been completely false. And you're right about the EU. I mean, he actually said before the election that we've got to accept Brexit and make the most of it. That's what he said. But of course, he's now come into power, and it's like, we've got to completely renegotiate the EU withdrawal agreement and bring us back closer to the EU. That's not what he was saying in the election, but that's what he's doing afterwards. But the reason he's doing it, quite, as you say, is because he's a globalist. So he supports all these global organisations, including global courts, which have actually got no authority. The courts have got no authority to implement this Chagos Island deal. It's all because he doesn't like the empire. He doesn't like the Commonwealth. He doesn't like what Britain did in the past. So he wants to get rid of these islands that Britain occupies around the world, which presumably includes the Falklands. I mean, Argentina must be rubbing their hands in glee because Argentina wants the Falklands, and it looks as though if they just have a word with Keir Starmer, he'll just say, right, well, how much can we pay you for them? I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in the days of madness, Sid. I mean, the colonial past he's trying to still make a recompense for. And when you look at the fact that, number one, the Chagos Islands was never owned by any other land, and yet they suddenly got Mauritius now to deal with. And it's
They're 1,000
1,500 miles
miles.
away.
Yeah, 1,000 miles from Mauritius. It's not as though they're just like next door. I mean, the Falkland Islands are at least next door to Argentina. But, it's like, it's ridiculous, the idea that they've got to give them to Mauritius. It's just no reason whatsoever to do it other than the far left that hate the colonial past of Great Britain. That's what it's all about.
He's a dangerous man, Sid. Would you go that far and say that?
Well, I think the dishonesty means that he's utterly untrustworthy. And interesting enough, Andrew Neil has highlighted this. He's is somebody who's a very respectable broadcaster, who's by no means on the right. I mean, I would say that he's on the left, but he's also a very clever broadcaster and somebody who's very perceptive. And he's highlighted the incredible dishonesty of Keir Starmer right from before the election, because he's very good at perceiving things and listening and making notes and coming back and saying, look, you said, and look, this is what you've done. He's very good at that sort of thing. And he's highlighted so much with Keir Starmer, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a superb article. But having said that, did he jump ship too early with GB News? He took 5 minutes to get out. And you wonder, because they're in trouble again, apparently. There's a programme on GB News late at night, 11 o'clock UK time, called Headliners. And it's a satire show basically, where they get comedians commentating on the day's news through mostly the newspapers. And they've made a slip up. Well, you say a slip up. Last week, they were talking about LGBT. And one of the comedians says, well, don't forget about the pedos. Drew laughter. What maybe a lot of people don't appreciate is the amount of paedophilia coming from the LGBT community allegedly is very high. Certainly, I've read this very day, compared with the heterosexual male, it's 11-1 committing paedophilic criminal charges in the real world. Now, they had, following that comment, 1,200 complaints to Ofcom, which is quite a lot, actually. Not everybody complains. They may take exception to what's been said. They don't complain, but 1,200 did. More than that, 70,000, as I understand it, complained through a petition. Now, that was organised by LGBT, of course. They're very good organisers of things like that. So maybe we could put that on one side, but look at the number of Ofcom complaints. It was substantial. And I thought, well, have they gone a bit too far? And then I always look and take the other side of an argument before expressing an opinion. Let's assume that they were talking about the Church of England as an example, and the problems that they've got with LGBT priests. And somebody made that same quip against the Anglican Church. Would you have got the same reaction that the show's going to be pulled? They're still thinking about it. But would it have got the public reaction or not, Sid?
Well, the problem is Ofcom, and that's why they target Ofcom with complaints. Because, you see, GB News are frightened of Ofcom. And that's why they got rid of Mark Stern, they got rid of Dan Wootton, they got rid of other people who said things that offended, apparently offended or drew Ofcom complaints. And Ofcom basically told GB News you got to get rid of these presenters. And it is a major problem, and it's understandable, because I'd also know from Christian television, the Ofcom have been on the backs of Christian television. If they dare to mention anything LGBT on Christian television, it's like, we'll remove your license. And obviously GB News are worried about having their license removed. And if Ofcom say to them, either you get rid of this program or we'll remove your license, you no longer have permission to broadcast at all, they've got no choice but to get rid of the program. I mean, that's the reality of it. The problem is Ofcom, because frankly, Ofcom are not fit for purpose. They're pursuing this hard left narrative, and they're not interested in the truth. I mean, you're absolutely quite right. I mean, the truth is that the whole paedophilia is rife in the LGBT community. And of course it's a massive concern, and they're even wanting to change the name. So we don't call it paedophilia anymore. We now call it minor attractive persons, and we try and make it acceptable. I mean, that's their agenda, and the agenda is vile, absolutely vile. And if Ofcom are helping them promote that agenda, Ofcom should be ashamed of themselves.
A lot of people agree with you, Sid, but don't say it. There's a lot of things we daren't say in the United Kingdom at the moment. And will it stop? Will it change? Well, America wants it to change. Donald Trump sending over this half-hidden, I don't know what it is. What do we call it? But there's certain investigators coming over from the States because they can't believe that people can close their eyes within 100, 200 meters of an abortion clinic and immediately get arrested. Oh, you can't pray, you can't think. They can't understand it in America. But Britain puts up with it. Why?
Well, I mean, basically, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, both of them, and probably the Greens as well, have had it in their manifestos that that's what they were going to do. And it is utter nonsense. I mean, because they're using what they were called protection orders, public service protection orders. So it was all the reason for those orders were introduced in the first place was to, if a large numbers of people were drinking and behaving in a threatening way, the police had the power to move them on from a public space. It could be the same if people were found taking drugs in a particular location, and a number of drug addicts were gathered in a particular place, and the police could arrest them, move them on. That's what the public service protection order or public space protection orders were all about. But for some reason, the abortion lobby picked them up and decided that they would use them to put in place zones around abortion clinics where people weren't allowed to go. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's nothing to do with the original purpose of the public space protection order at all. I mean, as I've probably said to you before, I mean, I actually took some leaflets to an abortion clinic, placed the leaflets inside the abortion clinic so that basically anybody going there could actually pick up and read these leaflets. I didn't speak to anybody. I just literally placed the leaflets there and left. And by the way, the leaflets actually drew attention to the fact that somebody attending that clinic had been sent home in a very unsafe fashion, and they ended up dead, and no action had been taken. But I think people going to that clinic should be aware of what had happened. So that's what the leaflet said. But I was charged under a public space protection order for literally going and depositing these leaflets there, and was fined £100, which, unlike some other people, I just decided to pay. Well, I paid, but I also tried to take the case to the European Court of Human Rights because alongside others who were fighting these public safe protection orders. But the European Court of Human Rights decided that they were quite happy. So this is the thing, you see. So America is actually saying now, oh, this is disgusting, this is terrible. How has it been possible? Has it been allowed? We've actually tried to take it to court. I mean, the Court of Appeal said that they were okay. The Supreme Court said they were okay. The European Court of Human Rights has said they're okay. So there's literally no way in which we can take further legal action on this issue. That's the reality of it. So what can you do?
Yeah, perhaps it's been highlighted, sadly, yesterday, this horrific event in Liverpool with the people carrier running over so many of the fans there. And before things hardly got started, the usual suspects were up there, Assistant Chief Constable, head of the fire brigade, mayor, and whatever, half a dozen of them, giving their rightly condolences. Not death so far, but we don't know yet. Hopefully there won't be. But as usual, the first sentence out of everybody's mouth, we're thinking and praying about the situation. No, it wasn't. Everybody except one said, we're thinking of the people knocked down and we're thinking of their families. Now, that's so different from the States. We're still on the States thing at the moment. Because in the States, every time, everybody well, even the Democrats are saying, well, we're thinking and praying about this terrible event that's happened. Praying seems to be the norm. It's less and less in Britain. Of course, Keir Starmer shouldn't say that because he's an atheist, and he didn't say it. He just said he was thinking about the families. What is hidden sometimes comes out in the most peculiar ways.
Yeah, I think obviously we should be praying for everybody involved. And it is almost, it seems, if you look at the event, almost a miracle that no one's actually died. And we hope no one will die. In my opinion, for what it's worth, looking at the footage, which I have done, I've looked at it several times, it looked as though this guy was driving into this crowd, trying to get through somewhere, and got literally just lost his rag. And it's just like, oh, this is ridiculous. All these people, not blocking this road and not letting me through, and just accelerated to try and get through. I don't think it was a terrorist incident at all, which is actually what the police have said. It wasn't a terrorist incident. It was just somebody made a terrible, terrible decision on the spur of the moment when he just lost his temper. And he was lucky to get away with his life, frankly, because the football fans smashed the windows, trying to drag him out. If the police hadn't been there and protected him and got him into the police van, they'd have probably actually killed him, because what he did was so stupid, so stupid. But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I'm right or not, but the police have said it's not terrorist related. So if it wasn't terrorist related, what was it? It was probably just somebody who was just made a very stupid decision.
Yeah, talking about stupid decisions and going back to our present leadership in the United Kingdom, there are two nasty things that are happening. And one is a bit of a conundrum. I said it would be some unusual discussion topics today. The first thing, of course, is the lovely Angela with her workers' rights bill. There are certain things that are still emerging, Sid, out of that are going to cause havoc to small and medium-sized businesses, even the biggies. But the small and medium-sized are going to be hit something rotten. They're going to go out of business, a lot of them that are on the edge at the moment. I mean, you cannot have workers phoning in, although having said that, they still do. One of our businesses is still restaurant business, which is particularly hardly hit in the United Kingdom. But Mondays are a nightmare. There's always some excuse for recovering from the celebrations of the weekend, the hangover. There's always some excuse. And what an employer can do is very little. But Angela Rayner's bill will say that they can't do a blooming thing. Lots of things in that bill is rotten, and giving all the rights to one side and no rights to another. It's affecting the big companies, of course, with the national insurance contributions. Even Currys are laying off staff. They've got it wrong, wrong, wrong.
Yeah, well, because you and I remember what it was like back in the 1970s, before the trade union legislation was introduced that basically got the situation under control. I mean, back in the 1970s, for people that don't know, we were in a situation where Ted Heath in 1974 called an election on the platform of who runs Britain. Does the government run the Britain, or do the trade unions run the Britain? And it was basically, everything was completely out of control. And the Labour Party got elected over the process of two elections in 1974 on the platform of we understand the trade unions better and we can bring peace. But by the end of their 5-year tenure in 1979, there was Russian rubbish was piled up in the streets. The roads weren't cleared of snow, which I can even remember that myself. And and everyone was on strike all over the country. And the Conservatives got elected with a great poster that said Labour isn't working, and Labour wasn't working. Margaret Thatcher said that she would bring in trade union legislation, and she did it step by step. So the first thing that she did was to get rid of the closed shop, and she got rid of secondary picketing. So what was happening there was that you'd have a load of miners that would appear outside of steelworks. I mean, I've actually seen this myself in Sheffield. Arthur Scargill with all his miners would turn up at the steelworks and would basically prevent people that wanted to go to work from going to work. That's what was going on back in the 1980s. And of course, everything came to a head when the miners themselves went on strike, led by Arthur Scargill, which was a planned strike. And also Margaret Thatcher was a strike she was prepared for. She knew it was going to take place. And when basically Arthur Scargill lost that strike, that's when the trade unions lost a lot of their power. Because I remember myself hearing people saying, well, if Scargill can't beat Thatcher, then what chance have we got? So all of a sudden you started having peace. And then they brought in 1984, they brought in the secret ballot so that there could be no strike without a secret ballot taking place first. If a strike was brought in without a secret ballot, it was illegal. That was when things really started to change. And the ordinary worker actually started having a say. It was no longer a case of it's all out today, lads, negotiations are broken down, no one can go to work. We've got to pick it in place. And that's what was going on before the secret ballot came out, and thank goodness, we started to change, and the whole industrial relations situation changed. It changed significantly over time. So what Angela Rayner's trying to do is to take us back to the 1970s, and but she probably doesn't realise what she's doing because she wasn't around at that time. She wants to give the trade unions power again. We hate what the Tories have done. We hate all the Tory trade union legislation. We're going to repeal it all. And it's all just utter nonsense.
Yeah, the other thing that Sir Keir is involved in, of course, is and the general blob, let's call it, the civil service, etc., are immigration figures. They're massaged every time. It's slipped out that actually things were rather better in the last year of Tory governments this last week because actually net immigration fell. Although, can I caveat that? Because I don't think, well, they can publish net immigration, it's useful, but it hides things, Sid. I want to know how many people are coming in and how many people are going out. In addition to that, I want to know the quality. It's no use having rubbish in and good people going out. I want to know the true immigration figures, not the net, because it's typical civil service hiding things.
Yeah, well, one thing the Conservatives did towards the end of their tenure was to say that people have got no right, people are coming here to work, or people coming here on a short-term visa, or coming here to study on a short-term visa, doesn't have any right to bring their families with them, which previously they had every right to bring their families with them. So just making that simple change had a dramatic effect on the actual overall figures. And the Labour Party are now claiming, we've got immigration down. Actually, it's nothing to do with them. It was that change which I just mentioned, which the Conservatives introduced, which has brought immigration down. Now, when we're discussing this topic, we have to understand that all the publicity tends to go to the small boats that are crossing the channel, and all these people are coming across illegally and applying for asylum. Now, in theory, that's about is people fleeing persecution. So when people come here fleeing persecution, then we give them a right to stay while we're looking into their case and to see whether they need help or not. So in theory, that's what's happening with those people. That's only a very small percentage of the overall immigration of people coming into the country. The vast majority are coming here either to study, or they're coming here on short-term work visas. And that's where the vast majority come. Now, it's, I mean, obviously, illegal immigration is important. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just not saying it's only a very small part of the overall picture. Now, what then tends to happen is that a large percentage of those who come on short-term visas overstay their visa. So they may come on a 3-year visa as a student, for instance. They finish the course and then they say, oh, I don't want to go back to wherever they've come from. I want to stay in the UK. And they may apply to stay. They may well be turned down, but they don't go back. They just carry on staying. And they carry on staying until they've stayed long enough to then say, I'm now entitled to indefinite leave to remain because I've stayed here for 10 years or whatever. That tends to be what happens. No, I'm not saying that, sometimes there's a particular reason why they can't go back and they need to stay in the UK. But the problem is the cases aren't processed. So if, for instance, somebody applies and they're turned down, they're just forgotten about in the system because the system, I'm afraid, the way it works at the moment, doesn't follow through on decisions that they make. Just all these decisions that are pending. And most of the time, they don't even know where these people are. They don't even keep a record of their address. So it's like someone comes, they apply from this address, they then move, because obviously students are moving around all the time. They don't just stay in one place. And the authorities don't keep even a record of where they are. I mean, that's why sometimes written questions have been put down in Parliament. How many of these people that are here illegally, because obviously if you come on a student visa for 3 years and you overstay, you're now here illegally. So how many people are here illegally? Do you know where they are and have got tabs on them? And it's like, well, about 20%. It's just ridiculous. That's I'm afraid where the problem is.
Yes, indeed. You mentioned green before. We've got to cover that a little bit now, because it's in so many people's hearts and minds before anything happens. Now, what I mean by that is, for instance, we have an opportunity to putting up to 8 major data centers in the United Kingdom. One's been mooted already for the northeast of England, which is a good idea, helps with unemployment up there, which is needed. But then somebody's worked out from the green point of view that actually one data center of the size that we need is responsible for more carbon footprint than an airport, an international airport. It's massive. There's a lot of power needed to run these data centers. And the Greens, Mr. Miliband is now creating about that. Oh, you can't have that because it's going to increase the footprint, CO2, etc. They've got to do something radical. This present government said, in my opinion, to get this into perspective. There's no perspective except net zero at all costs, it seems.
Yeah, see, I've studied this whole subject in depth now, and in fact, I'm going to do a whole program on it tomorrow for another channel. But one thing that's very clear is that carbon dioxide is not a gas that we need to get rid of. In fact, NASA have actually said that looking at the planet, it's actually a lot greener now than it was just a matter of 10 years ago. We're vastly increasing food production across the world. I mean, it's gone up exponentially, the amount of food that we're producing, which is all a very good thing. And the idea that somehow we've got to get rid of carbon dioxide is complete and utter nonsense. And by the way, if people don't understand what I'm saying, when they do greenhouses to grow plants in the winter and heat the greenhouses, they actually pump into them carbon dioxide to make the plants grow quicker. So it's known that carbon dioxide actually helps the production of plants. So the idea that somehow we've got to get rid of carbon dioxide or carbon carbon is somehow a gas that we have to get rid of. It's just complete and utter nonsense. The whole green agenda, from beginning to end, is a complete and utter hoax. The whole thing. I mean, global warming is well, in 1970 they were talking about global cooling, and they were telling us that we're going to have an ice age by the year 2000 if we didn't take urgent action. It was only in 1988 that they shifted from global cooling to global warming. But they've been predicting that. Well, for instance, Al Gore said that in 2009 at a climate summit that in 5 to 7 years that the Arctic ice cap would have completely melted and there'd be no ice there at all in the summer. The actual truth is that the amount of ice on land is virtually the same now as it was then. I mean, they actually predicted, believe it or not, that sea levels would rise by 7 meters. And we actually only need sea levels to rise by 2 meters, and London will be underwater. So they were predicting that, well, basically most of the United Kingdom will be underwater. But it's just simply not happened. None of their predictions have happened. They're all complete nonsense.
It's globalism. What's in it for them?
Okay,
Well, the globalists always parroting the same thing. Who's going to get rich out of all this? The big companies?
Well, money is part of it because they are making, I mean, for instance, they've been saying, we've got to save the polar bear. Polar bears are actually increasing. There's no need to save the polar bears at all, but they try and make out that, because of the ice melting, polar bears are suffering. So, you've got to please help us to save the polar bear. Now, please make a donation today. These lovely furry animals, which we've a part of our climate for so long, we're now losing. Please help us save them. Make your donation today to save the polar bear. And they make a lot of money out of this. Complete nonsense. It's complete rubbish. As I say, the number of polar bears are increasing. There's nothing to save at all. So there is money to be made from it. But the main agenda, in my view, is to create the need for a one world government. Because you see, the thing is, if it were true, what they were saying, if there was a problem with climate emissions, with carbon emissions, if there was a problem with carbon emissions and we had to reduce the amount of carbon being emitted, and we had somehow to take urgent action to get rid of all petrol cars and to get rid of all fossil fuels, if it was genuinely necessary, it's not something that can be done by one country. I mean, they say the UK total carbon emissions are something like 1% of the total worldwide. So if we get rid of all our carbon, it makes very little difference to the climate. So it's obviously got something that's got to be done internationally. So they're trying to create this idea that, we've got to get rid of carbon and we've got to have international organizations to do it. And then alongside that, we've just, in this last week or so, we've actually had the pandemic treaty that's come out of Geneva. Now, originally, this pandemic treaty was going to put all power into the hands of the World Health Organization. If the World Health Organization declared a pandemic internationally, then they would have the power to make the decisions on closing down economies worldwide. That was the original pandemic treaty. Now, everyone would have to stay at home. But fortunately, largely thanks to Citizen Go and their very strong campaign, they've actually now put into this pandemic treaty that the WHO can't force governments to do anything. So it's all been watered down, thank goodness. But that's what they wanted. What they wanted was to have all power in the hands of the World Health Organization. Then you've got the World Economic Forum, you've got the World Trade Organization, you've got all these bodies that are existing, as well as the United Nations, which is behind a lot of it all, which is pushing it forward. And by the way, the head of the United Nations, the current head of the United Nations, actually said in 2023, we no longer have global warming, we now have global boiling. And unless we take urgent action, the air will be unbreathable. Everyone will be dying. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. You just can't fathom it. But he's creating the idea that, we must, allow the United Nations to take urgent action, worldwide to prevent this global boiling that's now on us.
Yeah, we're in peculiar times, aren't we? Let's go across the pond shortly. Maybe we can learn something. Trump's putting through this next week his big, beautiful bill. What's that about? Well, perhaps we've got something to learn in the United Kingdom and Western Europe. It's actually 11 bills in one. One bill says that there's going to be no tax on tips for waiters and waitresses. Now that's a big thing in America when they're getting 20% on average. And don't try and do a runner and not pay your tip in America. They'll chase you down the street. And that's a big concession for them. There's no tax on overtime. Just think about that and the logical end for that. That could solve a country's lack of productivity problems, even. No tax on overtime, by gum. I mean, in America, don't forget, they have an average of 11 days off work for holidays a year. That's nothing compared with Europe. It's about 6 weeks now in Europe. So they work hard enough in America. That's probably why they're where they are economically. And he suddenly decided another part of this bill, there's going to be 15,000 more workers on our borders, he said. Now, have Britain got to listen to that? There's not enough people looking after our borders in Britain. 15,000 more in America. They've already got many times more than we have anyway. There's going to be a distinct rollback on green issues. He's not going to put up any longer with their nonsense. All this is in the big, beautiful bill. Sounds big and beautiful to me. Never get that in the UK, would we?
No, obviously not. But you see, right, we have to understand what Trump is doing. Through Doge, which he put Elon Musk in charge of, I mean, Elon Musk reckoned he could save possibly up to $2 trillion a year from the federal budget. What he saved, the figures I've seen that he's actually saved so far has been roughly 170 billion. Now, a lot of this has been on DEI programs, which is diversity, equality, and inclusion programs, which are basically woke programs he's got rid of. There's been an enormous amount of spending that's just literally said this is just an utter waste of money and has been stopped and has got rid of. A lot of people have been sacked, literally and companies have been told they're not allowed to pursue these programs. All government officers have been told all these programs must be cancelled. So a lot of money's been saved. So you have to appreciate that when you start to understand what Trump is now spending. So he's saved about 170 billion. He's now spending about 250 billion. So it's more. But as you say, a fair part of this spending is cutting taxes. Now, in order to bring growth into economy, what you need to do is to cut red tape. That's the first thing. I talk a lot about cutting quangos. In America, they call them NGOs, non-governmental organizations. They're the same thing. There's masses of them consuming enormous amounts of money, producing enormous amounts of red tape. I mean, Ofcom is one that we talked about earlier. That's one of these bodies that, frankly, it'd be best if we just got rid of. We don't need it, and if we didn't have it, we'd actually be a lot happier. That's the reality of it. So that's the sort of thing that we're talking about. Now, you see, in order to produce wealth, you've got to cut the red tape. You save enormous amounts of money by cutting the red tape, and then when you've done that, you increase capital spending. And so through the capital spending, you then employ lots of people, you build things, you create things. We've said the first thing we need actually in Britain is a new London airport in the Thames Estuary. It would create enormous amount of wealth, that would then come into the country through it. We shouldn't be expanding Heathrow, but Heathrow is too small for what we need in London. That's the reality of it. So you create a lot of wealth by building it. And you create a lot of jobs by building it. When it's built, you create a lot of wealth by everything that comes in through it. And that's how you create wealth. That's how you create growth. Now, through cutting this red tape, you're not only capital spending, you also cut taxes. And when you cut taxes, you put more money in people's pockets, and there's more reward for working. That's what you should do. And by the way, if people don't understand what I'm talking about, in this country, on Quangos, these NGOs, non-governmental organisation, we spent 90 billion in 2010. At the last election, that figure went up to 265 billion, which in real terms was a rise of 100 billion. But the latest figure, since Labour have come into power, they've set up 28 new Quangos, is now 353 billion. So we've now gone up in real terms by almost 200 billion in spending. And if you realise that the rise of national insurance, we're raising 40 billion, you realise how much money is just going down the drain. And Trump is actually getting to grips with this in America. That's what he's getting to grips with, and he's doing the right things. Absolutely.
I'm going to give you a newspaper headline, several newspapers, Sid, in actual fact, and I want you to explain it. Nigel gone left, Keir gone right.
I think it's all image, frankly. Keir hasn't really gone right at all. He's just decided to pick up this issue of immigration and pretend that he's going to reduce immigration just to try and stop people going to reform. He's not. The reality is he's doing nothing. He just wants to pretend he's doing something. That's Keir Starmer. As far as Nigel Farage is concerned, he's also trying to pick up some issues from the left. What's happened with Nigel Farage is that they haven't really got a manifesto, or very, very comprehensive manifesto. One of the things that Richard Tice was saying before Nigel Farage got involved was that they were going to cut taxes by 90 billion. And they were going to increase the tax threshold to 20,000. They were going to drastically cut VAT, what they said, and they changed drastically cut VAT to reduce it 2% from 20 to 18%. And they're going to introduce a new 10% tax band. And all this was going to cost 90 billion. Nigel Farage has said, no, we can't afford to do that, and got rid of it all completely. So that's probably what they're talking about with him shifting to the left. But the reality is that all that was never affordable unless they said what we've been saying is we're going to get the money from cutting Quangos. If they said we're going to get the money, the spending on Quangos has gone up by 200 billion, and we're going to use 90 billion of that to cut taxes, then that will be fine. But they can only cut the taxes when they've actually saved the money on the Quangos, which is what we've been saying. We've got to save the money first. And when we save the money, then we'll use it to cut taxes, and we'll use it on capital spending, which is the right approach.
There you go. Let's go on to football. Finally, running out of time, we've got to mention Gary Lineker. I don't know why, but there again, he's been in trouble for a long time, Sid. It's not a new thing. He's got previous on this, and they've at last got rid of him. I suppose ITV will come along and grab him and pay him even more money.
Well, maybe. But what's interesting from my perspective, which I've been reading today, is that Dan Walker's been putting in his pennyworth. Now, I like Dan Walker. Dan Walker, by the way, if people don't know, is a Christian. And I knew him when he was in Sheffield. And believe it or not, when he moved from Sheffield to London, it must have been about 15 years ago now, I actually arranged the mortgage for him to actually buy his first property in London when I was a mortgage advisor. So I knew him personally. And it's interesting, I was talking to him then about, being a Christian in journalism and what was involved, and, and what support he needed and goodness knows what. So it's very interesting that now he's basically saying, Gary Lineker was a great man, and it looks as though he's trying to position himself to take over Gary Lineker's job. And if he does, fantastic. Dan Walker's a great guy. And I think most people that actually enjoy watching him on television, because he's got a very easy manner. He's a very, very pleasant character. And, and God bless him. But yeah, I'm pleased to see the back of Gary Lineker. And I hope it means that we see Dan Walker taking his place.
There you go. A promotion, a recommendation. Well, lastly, before we
Someone's got to take his place.
well, yes. We've got to mention at long last in our long list of gripes about the great game, VAR. Now, we'll probably differ on this one, Sid. I would be glad, frankly, to see the end of it. It's ruining the game in many. I mean, we had this famous event with the Manchester United goalkeeper not grabbing hold of the ball, and when did the referee blow a whistle? So you've not solved any problems. You've created more of a bureaucracy. Last thing we want in the United Kingdom is more bureaucracy. Think of the amount of extra cameras, the amount of extra people all involved, and to spoil the enjoyment of the occasion. Football is immediate. You've got to cheer and you've got to boo at the right time. It comes from the heart. VAR. Oh, well, let's wait 5, 6, 7, up to 10 minutes before the referee looks at his screen numerous times. It's a nonsense. And it's not made any difference, Sid, to the fairness of things. On average, you're going to get some good referees, some bad referees, some good decisions, some bad decisions. But over the season, it averages itself out. Leave it where it is. Get rid of VAR.
You're right. We differ. No, I think VAR is very necessary. And by the way, any time taken to go to VAR or the referee takes a look at the screen is all added on at the end, which is why sometimes you get plus 14 now at the end of a match, because that's all a lot of that is time that the referee's taken to look at decisions. And that decision in the Aston Villa game with Man United was a terrible decision, but the mistake of the referee there was to blow his whistle so quickly. He blew his whistle, which basically meant as soon as you blow your whistle, of course, then everything has to come to a halt, and you can't blow your whistle and then allow a goal which happens after you've blown your whistle. So that's why VAR couldn't come in and look at it, because he'd blown his whistle and stopped the game, basically. Now, if he hadn't blown his whistle and had gone to VAR, it would obviously have been a goal for Aston Villa, because the referee was wrong. There was no foul on the goalkeeper. So obviously the referee thought there was a foul on the goalkeeper, but there wasn't. And he was actually quite a long way away, because that actually showed you where he was standing when he blew his whistle. He was a long way from the incident, so he didn't see carefully what had happened. And you needed actually to be quite close to see that there was no foul on the goalkeeper. What the player did was perfectly legitimate, and it was a perfectly good goal. So no, I mean, what we need is referees to actually be careful how quickly they blow their whistle, so that cases like that can go into VAR. And no, I think, and then when you look at offsides, I mean, it's very, very hard for linesmen to get every decision right on an offside. And when it goes to VAR, you can be, the very moment the ball is kicked, you can see the situation, you can see whether it's offside or not. You can actually have the right decision taken in every case. Very, very important. Same with goals. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult for a referee to know if the ball has crossed the line or not. But with goal line technology, you can go and have a look. You can see if the ball is across the line or the ball is not quite across the line. And it's very, very important, because it can be a situation where, yes, that's a genuine goal. No, it's not a genuine goal. And if it's all just purely on the eyesight of the linesman or the referee, they're bound to get decisions wrong. If it goes to technology, it means that every decision is going to be right. And that it has to be the right way forward. I'm sorry.
Well, there you go. I see. Well, as we've said in previous meetings, Sid, I support you 100% on your politics, not your football. Anybody that supports Reading, come on. I'm not listening to this VAR thing.
Well, it's Reading have just given a new contract to their captain, so who's now going to be there till 2008, and all the process that they're going through now is offering new contracts to the players, because a lot of them are out of contract. I desperately hope the players will stay. There'll be new contracts offered, and we'll have a good team for next season. Because if all those players stay that finished 7th last season, they're all young players. It was the second youngest team in the division. If they all stay, Reading will do very well next season. If they go, then goodness knows what team we're going to have.
Well, there you are. Something to look forward to, Sid. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.